Hi there, South by Southwest. I hope you all are having a good afternoon. My name is Cecilia Noel, and I'm an associate editor at Stranger's Guide. We're an award-winning magazine that commissions stories from local writers and photographers to build authentic portraits of places like Tehran, Scandinavia, and Lagos. You can learn more about what we do at strangersguide.com, but today I'm here to introduce our distinguished panelists. Nora Ali is the CEO and co-founder of an upcoming media venture that is the co-host of the Business Casual podcast from Morning Brew. She recently covered business and tech news as an anchor on Cheddar, having previously been a senior product manager at Jet.com. Nora started her career as an Asian equities analyst at Goldman Sachs. Marc Lore is a serial entrepreneur who has started and sold 4 companies, including sales to Amazon and Walmart. His latest venture is Wonder, a company that's reinventing the at-home dining experience. And he is the NBA's newest owner, having recently purchased the Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Lynx. During today's session, you can ask questions of our panelists using the Engage function on the South by Southwest app, if you just go into the app and look for today's session. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hello, hello. I feel like I'm too short for this chair.
Yeah, me too.
I sit back, my feet don't even touch the ground. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to be here. I'm Nora, obviously, and this is Marc Lore. Marc, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this conversation, I gotta ask you, do you like being on stages? Do you do anything to hype yourself up, or is it just totally normal to you now?
Yeah, it's not the most comfortable place now.
All right, well, we're gonna make this easy for you. So the structure of this session today, I wanna focus on your framework of VCP, which is Vision, Capital, People, and understand how you apply that to the biggest endeavors in your life right now. And we met 7 years ago when I started working at Jet.com. It was pre-launch. The office was pretty subpar at the time in Montclair, New Jersey. I didn't even have a desk. I sat in the crack between the desks of my colleagues. And you were right there in the trenches with us. And I think that's very relatable to a lot of the startup founders we have in the audience, where you hustle super hard, you don't have the nicest things at the time, but you then sold Jet.com to Walmart for $3.5 billion, which is not that relatable, but you've done it before too. You sold Quidsi to Amazon for $550 million. So I want us to crack how you uniquely have been able to do this, and now leveraging that VCP framework. So we're gonna touch on Wonder, we're gonna touch on the city of Telosa, and we're gonna touch on the Timberwolves. Are you ready?
Great, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So the title of this session is Chasing Moonshots. So let's start there, because you always think 5, 10, 20 years into the future. So what does a moonshot mean to you, in your words?
Moonshot, I would say low probability of success with a massive outcome. That to me is a moonshot. If it has a high probability of success, it's probably already been done. And things that have outsized upside usually have a lower probability. So it's just getting the framing right on that. Many people, they don't want to accept the fact that what they're about to kill themselves for has a low probability of success. And if you're a moonshot seeker like I am, you go after opportunities like that, because there aren't a lot of people doing it.
Mm-hmm. So. And it's not necessarily a particular kind of technology or a particular category or industry. No. It can be anything.
Could be anything.
Could be anything.
Could be a sports team, it could be a city, it could be a startup, it could be in any sector. It doesn't have to be a deep tech company or anything like that.
And in order to execute on moonshots, you have popularized VCP, which stands for Vision, Capital, and People. So let's start with the definitions. What is an effective vision? What makes a good vision?
Yeah, the whole Vision, Capital, People framework is something I came up with because it's a way of sort of like holding yourself accountable to this sort of moonshot idea. A lot of times people get caught up and they get into the weeds of things, of like the execution, and this allows you to sort of rise up above it, because there's no way when you're in the weeds you could actually simultaneously think 10 or 20 years out into the future. And so I believe if you get those 3 things right, if you shape a really big long-term vision you're able to come up with a pitch for that vision, to raise capital, to then go out and hire the very best people in the world, then that's sort of the model. Mm-hmm. You don't need yourself to actually need to get into the weeds. You need to be able to see the whole big picture. And so on the vision, to answer your specifically around vision, I think it is thinking bigger than you're probably thinking if you're an entrepreneur, and where you want to be 10 or 20 years into the future. And don't hold back your thinking based on what you think is possible today. It's just being open to say, what could this be? How big could this be? How much good could you do with the company? What's the social mission of the company? So you sort of craft that big vision, and I think it's important to get it down on paper and to get, if you have a couple key people involved, advisors or whatever, or even employees, to spend maybe 100 hours of time crafting the vision, word by word, maybe a paragraph that just explains, like paint a picture for what you want it to be. And every word matters. The nuance is the further you go out, the more each word matters. And if you say good or great, it has a very big difference 10 years out. Sure. You know, do you want to be the best at something? Do you want to be number one or number two? Like really writing down every word and getting everyone to agree with it, that that's the vision. And then what's the strategy for getting there? And when I mean strategy, I mean sort of the 3 to 5 strategic statements of how you're uniquely going to achieve that vision. You may or may not at this point, depending on what part you are, start putting some tactics behind each strategy, depending on how big the idea is. Some strategies need a few tactical bullets. And once you have that framework set, the vision and the strategy of how you're going to get there, then it's time to put together the organizational structure that best supports that strategy. A lot of people assume that like the org structure would be under the P in VCP, under people. But it's really more about building the org structure before you even consider people, building the org structure to support that strategy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people don't even think about the org structure as an important component of it, but it really is important, because if you have a strategy to do something that's very unique to your company and hard, you might want to have an individual report direct to the CEO that's responsible for that strategy and align sort of the executives that report to the CEO with some of the core strategies. And if you get that right, it becomes a really powerful model.
Yeah, the org structure is not something that you would automatically think is something you have to think about early on in a founder's journey, but to your point, it's very critical to have that chief people officer and have the right people there pretty early on to achieve that vision. So I do want to use a specific example of vision. You invested in a flying taxi company called Archer, and the founders came to you with a vision. And they didn't have any experience building flying cars and with aviation necessarily themselves, but what was it about their vision that made you believe in them as founders?
Well, two different things. One, believing them as founders was more under the P part of it. I thought that they exhibited the attributes of successful founders, and I can get into that too. But since you asked specifically about the vision, they were just thinking really big. They were thinking about not just getting sort of this electric vertical and takeoff and landing. It's sort of like it's a passenger drone. Have you ever seen a drone? It's sort of like a drone that carries passengers, so it's all electric. And they had a really big vision for how the world would adopt this technology in the future. And it was really well-formed vision as to what they wanted and saw the world to look like. And I think it was how well thought out the vision was, because that's, like I said, a big component. Sometimes you just think, all right, I'm just going to create this flying car and then we'll see what happens, sort of thing. And they had they just had a really clear vision of what it could mean and how it could transform urban mobility, and how the price point could get to the point where it's accessible for everyone. And they just had they had really thought about it. And then on the people side of it, they were, I think, very uniquely qualified, even though they had no previous experience in this area, to actually go and execute it, because of their passion, their drive, tenacity, willing to work 100 hours a week, and willing to do whatever it takes to be successful.
You mentioned some
and
words.
hire great people.
Yeah, great people. And you mentioned words like tenacity, and that's part of your SPOTIC model.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to us about what those traits are that you look for in founders, in business partners? What is SPOTIC?
SPOTIC is smart, passionate, optimistic, tenacious, adaptable, kind, and empathetic. And I think the kindness and empathy is important because it sort of balances the tenacity and the passion and optimism. And you find a lot of entrepreneurs that have the passion and tenacity, but they'll run over people. And so I think doing it with empathy and being kind at the same time is this really incredible balance that allows you to build a great culture. And from a great culture, you're able to hire and retain the very best people. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. The VCP framework, if you kind of boil it down, at the end of the day, it is about the people that make the businesses. All the businesses that I've done that have been successful, it's always been, I've been surrounded with great people that loved what they did. They followed me company to company, and I feel grateful. Like that is, you can't do anything without great people, and so you have to create a culture that people want to work.
I can attest there are lots of ex-Jet, ex-Quidsy people who are now working on projects and ventures with you, and there's a lot of loyalty that you've harbored, certainly. When it comes to SPOTIC, what are some of your favorite ways to figure out if someone has those traits? Maybe during interviews, or any of your favorite questions that people here who are hiring or might be going into the interview rooms that they can sort of think about to help to flesh out those traits?
There's not like a single question for each one, like, okay, now we're going to ask the passion questions, we're going to ask the optimism questions. What I find is most important, first of all, I should say that I spend an incredible amount of time on the resume itself before someone even gets an interview. I think a lot of people are very quick till they see a resume and they see relevant experience and they say, great, let's interview them. I have learned my lesson the hard way that you open yourself up to, one, unconscious bias, and two, honeypotting. Honeypotting, this concept of you just like the person. You know what I mean? You interview them, they say they had the right experience, you're there for an hour, you like the person, you have a good conversation, and you hire them, and that's it. And they're expected to be with you for years. And I don't really do that anymore because I've been honeypotted. So basically spend a lot of time on the resume itself, and there's a certain pattern recognition of resumes of people that have a high probability of being a star within the organization.
Superstars, right?
Superstar.
Yeah.
Star, superstar, mega superstar. But and there's a pattern, and the pattern is pretty simple. It's a little more of an art, but at a high level, it's starting from the beginning when somebody graduates school and putting yourself in the mind of the person as if this person was a superstar. They were incredible. And look at what they do at the places they work, how long they stay, did they get promoted and move, and then most importantly, when they move, is that the move a superstar would make? And it's amazing when you have somebody with like a 20-year career, how quickly you can see things that don't make sense, like lateral moves, or moving from a very good company to a bad company, or getting into a company and being there, coming in at a director level and being there for 4 years and never getting promoted to senior director or VP. Or there's all these like things that you see along the way of not steady progression from company to company. There's obviously all kinds of, there's always reasons why somebody might, leave their career, they have a kid, and they come back 5 years later and they have to start at a lower level. Like, you need to take into account things like that. Like, there are different situations. It's not like ironclad, this is the way you do it. But just looking at a resume through that lens and having the strength, basically, to not interview somebody, even though somebody sends you the resume and say, this person's good. I guarantee you, every person out there, unless they're bad, every person will say something good about somebody. So you just have to be really careful, and I don't really take that into account whether somebody says somebody's good. It's really looking at the resume, and then when you bring them in to interview them, it's really about cultural fit and values alignment and SPOTIC. Do they have what it takes? They've got the resume, but in this environment, we have a certain set of values as a company. Do they align with those values? And do they have the traits that I believe would make them successful inside of a startup, which is the SPOTIC? Mm-hmm. And so the questions I would ask aren't necessarily specific. It's trying to get make the interview not a question that they ever would have heard before. So that's
Can
the
you share
key.
one of them? Because you asked me one, and it was about walking backwards.
I was just going to say that 'cause that one seems to be the crowd favorite.
Yeah.
But I would ask the question, what is the minimum amount of money that you would make, minimum amount of money that you would take to walk backwards for a week everywhere you go? The only thing I guarantee is safety, but you have to go to work, you have to go out to dinner, you have to walk backwards for a week. You can't tell anybody why you're doing it. If they ask you, you just say, sorry, I can't tell you.
It's just who I am.
What's the minimum amount of money? And it's not meant to be a negotiation, and it's not necessarily like there's a right answer. It is walking through the logic about how somebody would think about what the minimum amount of money is. And that usually gets people thinking, and it leads to different things about people's, how they, what their fear tolerance is of embarrassment, how light they are, how serious they are, how important they think, their job is, because they wouldn't want to, be perceived a certain way. There's lots of things that come out of that. And it can go any which way, and they never know which way it's going to go. And, it also, some people get really stubborn. Somebody will say, I do it for 10,000. And I said, this is not an interview question. I mean, in reality, if somebody came up to you with $10,000 cash, you would walk out of here backwards for a week. And they'll stick to it, and I'll ask them again and ask them again, and then I'll go get my checkbook.
Yep.
And I come back with
and
the
they get
check.
scared.
And then they back off.
Yeah. You asked me this question when we were at dinner together with my mom, and to prove your point, you literally walked yourself to the bathroom backwards. You say, you know what, yeah, whatever. And you come back, and then I do it too. And the waiter, as I'm leaving the bathroom, was like, he's walking backwards again, isn't he? So they're familiar that this is a question you like to ask. But it's very interesting. I definitely backtracked myself.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively. I backtracked when you said, oh, here's my checkbook. Like, let me actually write you a check for 10,000.
Yeah.
I said, wait a second. No, thank you.
Another great question I like to ask, again, it's not necessarily a right answer, but I definitely I have a bias one way, but would be if you could only be perceived in the workplace as one of two types of people. Either you're perceived as being very smart, but not very nice, or very nice, but not very smart. Which would you choose? You can only choose one. And I definitely skew toward the very nice and not very smart. And it surprises me how many people actually pick the very smart and not very nice. And it's not definitive. That question doesn't rule somebody out. But it's that combined with lots of other things, and you have to sort of bring it all together. It's a way to get to the kindness and empathy piece of it. I think somebody who's really empathetic and kind, they can't stomach the idea of not being perceived as not very nice. Just can't do it.
Right.
And then some people can't stomach the idea of being perceived as not very smart. And so it just depends. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with people that answer it that way. I have no judgment or sort of bias, but in the company culture that I like to create, with kindness and empathy being two pillars of the 7 traits, I think I prefer that. And yeah.
So we touched on vision, we touched on people. Before we get into Wonder and your specific ventures, very quickly on capital.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing first-time founders should keep in mind when they're pitching investors and trying to raise capital?
Yeah. Well, it's lots of things there. I would say it all starts with a killer pitch deck, and the pitch deck thinking about it as you're telling a story. You're trying to tell a story, not so much like you would learn maybe in business school or something where there's a prescripted sort of way to lay out the slides. You're really telling a story and trying to get the audience, in the case, the potential investor, to believe in something bigger than themselves, and something really big, paint a really big vision, and then explain how you're uniquely qualified to bring it home, to get there. Mm-hmm. But it's like the story thread has to, so many times I'll listen to pitch decks and it's sort of just very, not a story.
Maybe
it's just disjointed, but I'll just say, like, this is what we do, this is how we make money, this is our revenue model, this is how we're gonna, this is our team, this is our solution to, this is the problem, this is the solution. Like, it's not a story. So I would always tell people, like, what is the story? Because story is what sells early on in an entrepreneur's history. And that's the seed round. The A round is really about proving that the customers love your product, and you haven't really tackled unit economics yet, but you see a path. And then the B round, customers love it, you now have proved unit economics, and then sort of the C round is all about execution and scale. And so that's kind of like a pattern there. Some just things that pop in my head, advice would be to under-promise and over-deliver with respect to the financial projections, at least in the first 18 to 24 months. Because most investors will say no, and even I've had a good track record raising capital. I've raised over $1 billion of venture capital across 13 rounds of financing, and my hit rate is about 10%. 1 in 10 VCs will say yes. So what happens is the other 9 and 10, it's either like not the right time, not the right stage, you haven't proved certain things, and like you wind up coming back to them in the next round. And so it's really important that you put projections out that you hit. You keep the investors that say no informed every month, because once they realize that you've done exactly what you said, it's amazing the credibility you get with the venture capitalists, because they're not used to that. And so don't think when somebody says no, just write them off. Think, oh, next round. I always ask at the end, I'm like, if we were further along, if we had done X, Y, and Z, could you imagine investing? And if they say, yeah, then you better get on it, and every month put together an investor report. Here are my 12-month, 18-month projections, and each month we did exactly what we said, and just do that. The other piece of advice would be just to not worry so much about dilution. It gets me crazy when founders talk about, oh yeah, but that's a lot of dilution. The best investors are going to see the best deals. They're going to command the best prices. And so yeah, if you want to get the best investors in, which I would recommend, it's going to be at a higher cost of dilution, and it's worth it. The other thing about dilution is it's never about this round, it's always about the next round. And you want to make sure you have momentum going into the next round, and you have enough time and you raised at a good valuation so that you can double it or triple it going into the next round. That momentum people can feel and see. If you raise too high valuation because the markets are hot and the market's correct and you've made a lot of progress, but you're not able to raise in an up round, never mind 2x, you're kind of stuck. You always want to give yourself the flexibility to know, oh yeah, even in a bad market, I'm going to be able to double the valuation going into next round. And if you're able to do that, your existing investors will form the foundation for that next round. If you don't have your existing investors forming the foundation because they're not happy, it's really sometimes hard to get a new investor in without the support of your existing. So fortunately, in my startups, the existing investors have always come. Mm-hmm. The other third thing of advice would be not to, feel like you need to have just like one investor. Let's say you're raising 10 million or 5 million. Somebody says, I'll give you 5 million, and then be done. I always like to diversify and keep the venture a little bit tight and bring in another player so that in that next round, they're both like aching to want to write a bigger check. And then you have two investors, which is a nice foundation to just having one that was sort of satisfied in the first round. And now it got to the point now with my current startup, I had 6 investors that could write big checks into a single round. And so when the next round came up, already had like $200 million from the existing investors before any new investors came in. So that's sort of...
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And I understand you didn't know what a cap table was when you first made your first pitch, so you got to start somewhere.
I'll never forget how embarrassing that was. The very first investor pitch, and this was like in 1999, and went into a VC, first pitch ever, gave the deck, and the venture capitalist said, okay, this sounds pretty cool. Tell me what your cap table looks like. And I looked at Vinny, my co-founder, we looked at each other, we're like, we don't know what a cap table is. That was embarrassing. But you all start somewhere.
Yeah. So I do want to get into Wonder, specifically your food delivery company, but let's do a quick lightning round of questions just to spice things up a little bit.
Okay.
My first question is, what is your #1 productivity hack?
Productivity hack? I would say, I have a lot of, I definitely try and outsource everything and try and be really productive with my time. But I would say maybe trying to respond immediately to every text and email.
You're very responsive.
Yeah,
great.
immediately, because what happens is I find when you sort of let the queue build up, there's always a queue, and then you always wind up having to go back through the queue. What should I answer? What did I forget? And you waste a lot of time going back through that queue of things. If you literally just hit everything in real time, there's no queue, you never need to go back, you save a lot of time. So I would say that's probably what it is.
One more lightning round question. Why do you like magic?
Oh, magic? I was always fascinated from a little kid. I don't know why, but I always wanted the magician to come to my birthday party from like a little kid, like 4 years old, you know? And yeah, I'm just fascinated. Maybe it's that idea of like, I like to build stuff from nothing. And magicians sort of do that. They sort of create things out of nothing, out of the thin air sometimes, which I find fascinating and fun.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, on to Wonder. What is the vision for Wonder?
What's the big vision? I mean, I think it's important to probably start with just the mission of the company.
Sure.
We believe everyone in the world has a right to great food. And the vision is really to bring high quality food to people around the world in any format that they want it, whether they want the food cooked outside their door, whether they want food delivered from a local restaurant, whether they want to make food themselves through some sort of meal kit. However they want food, we do it in the most cheapest, most sustainable, most convenient way. That's sort of like the bigger vision. So you can imagine at some point in the future having this Wonder app and wanting dinner or wanting to make dinner for a family and having all the solutions right there. And the place we started with was the hardest piece, which was mobile restaurants that cook outside your door. So we've created 17 vertically integrated restaurants from scratch. These are mobile restaurants across every cuisine type, from premium steak down to pizza and burgers and everything in between, Thai, Japanese, Chinese. We own these restaurants, and on the Wonder app, you can see the 17 restaurants, see how many minutes each truck is away from you. You're not scheduling it, it's all real time. And you can see the pizza truck, DeFaro Pizza, is 7 minutes away. You order your food, click on it, you can watch the truck come to your house. It cooks the pizza right outside your door in 7 minutes and brings it to your door piping hot. It's cheaper than DoorDash, it's hotter, it's higher quality, it's more sustainable. And that's kind of Wonder in a nutshell. That's the hard piece, because obviously we spent the last 3.5 years doing R&D in food science and food engineering to make it so that you can take this high quality food and cook it in a truck without an open flame. So it's a high speed impingement oven where a lowly trained person can cook an incredible filet mignon steak with literally the push of a button and have it come out the same every time, incredible quality. So that we spent a lot, we're really, the technology and the food science is really where we've invested most.
I like that you said let's start with the mission before we get into the vision, but very quickly, what is the difference between a mission and a vision?
Yeah, the mission is the North Star. It's sort of the highest purpose of the organization. It's the ultimate why. So if you come up with a mission statement and you think it's the mission, ask yourself, why is that why? And then if there's an answer to the why, then your answer, and when there's no other answer to the why, like Disney's mission is to make people happy, there's no why do you want to make people happy, it's sort of, there's really no reason. That is the ultimate why. A lot of times I see mission statements, there's another why to be asked, there's a higher order. So we believe everyone has the right to great food. There's a lot of people around the world, there's people even in America in food deserts and things that don't have access to great food, and it doesn't need to be that way. Restaurants can't afford to go into some of these food deserts because there's not enough demand to put a brick and mortar restaurant that has good food. But since we've turned restaurants into basically fractional restaurants with these mobile concepts, that we can go into a lot of these areas that doesn't make sense for restaurants to go into economically. So to answer your question, so it's the ultimate why, it's the mission. It's usually got a higher purpose that is really, it falls under the P part of ECP because it's the foundation of the culture. We believe everyone has a right to great food. That's meant to be inspirational and for people to build a culture around, that people are inspired, they want to come work there. There's a higher purpose. It's not just, to make a $1 trillion market cap company. That's on the V side of things. Like on the P side, it's the culture, it's living with purpose, it's having a social mission and doing something that really matters in the world. And then on the vision, and by the way, you never achieve the mission. It's sort of, it's a forever thing, and it's your guiding light. The vision, on the other hand, usually there's a time period associated with it, and say 10 or 15, 20 years, but it's meant to be achievable. You're painting a picture of what the future is going to look like that's big, bold, way out there, and it's many times could be even this moonshot and think, wow, if we ever were able to do that. But it is achievable, and it can drive people and drive the strategy. But one day you might get there, and if you think about 100 years from now, people would not have the same vision. They would have the same mission, but they wouldn't have the same vision. There'd be a new vision for the next 10 years, and the next 20 years, and companies evolve over time. So they should be very mutually exclusive, and a lot of times they overlap. Like you see a vision and a mission, and it's like, wait, that vision could be a mission. The mission it shouldn't be like that. It should really be one's business oriented and it's a big goal. Painting a picture for what the goal looks like. And this is just simply, usually the mission is just a few words that is meant to inspire and say why you exist.
Yes, we love that. So as far as people for Wonder, it's not just about the people you've hired, the employees, the executives, it's also world-class chefs like Bobby Flay and Marcus Samuelson providing these services and this food for the company. How did you get them on board when maybe they previously had been opposed to having delivery because they want their customers to have that fine dining in-restaurant experience? How did you get them?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Is when we talked to Bobby Flay, who was I think one of the first chefs that we got on board. First, we had to prove to him that we can cook high-quality food with the push of a button in an oven, and he was sort of blown away. We actually served him a steak, and he sat down and he ate it. He said, "Okay, great. Fine, you can replicate my steak, great. But I still have no idea how you're gonna cook this in an oven with somebody who's low skilled with the push of a button. Like that's impossible." And we said, "No, Bobby, that steak was cooked with the push of a button." He's like, "No effing way, we had to bring him down to the kitchen, show him the oven. And even up until the point we said, "Okay, we're gonna put this in, you're gonna press the button, put it in." He goes, "There's no way. He presses the button." We wait about like 6 minutes, it comes out, and he was blown away, he was sold. So he, yeah, like many chefs, they don't want the quality of their food to degrade as it's shipped from a delivery aggregator. And in this case, it's literally cooked outside your door, so it's piping hot. And that makes all the difference with taste. Even if it was the exact same quality food, there's no comparison to getting hot food versus having it cool as you
100%.
ship it. So.
Couple quick lightning round questions again. What do you do for fun, Marc Lore?
What do I do for fun? Well, now it's the Timberwolves.
Yes.
Going to the games, and I just started learning how to play basketball too, because I felt like if I owned a team, I should know how to play. So that's been fun. I really enjoy that.
Didn't someone call you the worst basketball player they'd ever met in your past?
That was a back of my mind motivating factor too. I did Joel Embiid from the 76ers. I played 2-on-2 with him many years ago, and he called me the worst basketball player he's ever seen. Now, I'd never played basketball, so it's probably fitting, but it was in the back of my head, this little motivator, like, "Okay, Joel, let's go, man. Let's go to the free throw line now after 6 months of practice." And I also like magic. That's fun. I do that for fun.
You do have fun. You make time for yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, the biggest moonshot of them all, the moment we've been waiting for, the city of Telosa.
Okay.
I'll let you sort of dictate where we start with that, because it's a very big vision, very big mission. And I think you've said in the past, you should really push yourself to the extremes when you're thinking about big visions and thinking about missions. And this is very much extreme. You're building a city from scratch. You're not just trying to update the systems in existing cities. You're doing it from the bottom up. So what is the purpose? Maybe let's go with purpose.
Start with mission?
Yeah, mission and purpose of Telosa.
That would be embarrassing if I didn't have a mission statement after all that talk. The mission is really nothing short of creating a more equitable and sustainable future. And that's sort of the genesis of the idea. I didn't say, okay, I have this idea, I want to build a city from scratch. It really was thinking about what's happening in America, and I'm sure everyone feels it, how America's become more divided, more polarizing than ever, as to trying to get to the root cause of why. Like, what exactly is happening? And I think everyone sort of gets it, but there's no real good solution. I believe in capitalism as an economic model. I think it's a great model. But like any model, it's got its shortcomings. And I think there's still a shortcoming yet to be solved. That's one of the primary reasons why we're seeing this divide in the country. And if you just rewind a little bit with respect to capitalism, back in, 100 years ago or so, when there wasn't any laws against monopolies, there was no antitrust, and the government didn't step in, workers were abused. And monopolies existed, and the customers suffered, and the workers suffered. And then the government said, wait, capitalism, we need to fix this. This doesn't work unless there's competition, fair competition. They put antitrust laws, and you could argue whether it's good or bad, but it was a solve to a serious shortcoming of capitalism. I read this book, Progress and Poverty, by Henry George, this late 19th century economist, and basically convinced me that the other flaw with capitalism is land ownership. It's just the way we distributed land in the world, and the idea that there's a finite amount of land, and somebody could, at some point in time, put a stake in the ground and say, this is my 160 acres, and without having to do anything, could literally sit on that land. No productivity, no capital invested, no risk, nothing, just sit on the land and watch it appreciate. And in many cases, communities are built on this land, tax dollars are invested in infrastructure to boost the value of the land, yet the landowner did nothing but basically claim it at some point. And I thought, wow, imagine how valuable like the land of Manhattan, where I live, is today relative to when it was just an empty island. Where did all that value go? And so it occurred to me that if the land were owned, at least in the beginning stages when it was worthless, if the land were owned by the community itself, and then communities were built, infrastructure was added, and the land went from being worthless to being worth, some reasonable amount of money, where it became more like any other asset class where it would just grow at 3 to 5% a year. But that big step change from going like it's worthless to being now valuable, if that was captured by the community and an endowment was created, some sort of sovereign city fund, if you will, like a sovereign country fund, but for the city, and that money was basically, so that land was part of the endowment. The land was then sold off once it was, you captured that value. Take those dollars and then invest the income on those dollars each year back into society in the form of advanced medical care and education and affordable jobs and housing. And so we did the math on it. We said, well, if you can take like desert land in Nevada, 200,000 acres, that's worth about $500 million, and that land, and that turned into a city of 5 million people, the land would be worth somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion. So just in round numbers, if you said $1 trillion, and that money was all in a foundation that basically then sold the land off, so it's not meant to be you can't own land, but at least in the initial capture. And that $1 trillion would earn $50 billion a year, and $50 billion a year would be invested in social services. You could actually have the best of both worlds. You could have world-class social services equivalent to the best social democratic countries in the world with our current, lower tax rate on a relative basis. You sort of could have both. And if people trusted this foundation and this endowment to do good, to provide education and all these benefits that the government can't with tax dollars, maybe people would donate to this endowment and create this incredible virtuous cycle of people wanting where they live to be better for their kids' generation and their grandchildren's generation to come. And that's not happening today. Nobody would ever consider donating money to like the government to make the city better. You would donate to a school, university, you trust those institutions, but you don't trust the government. And this would be another alternative, a foundation to trust. So that was a long way of saying that's the genesis of the idea. The city is really a tactic to prove this new model. But while we're at it, if we are going to build a city in the desert from scratch of 5 million people, let's make it the most sustainable city in the world. Because so that's why it's about being more equitable and more sustainable, and that's the mission. And there's obviously incredible technologies that exist today that can make the city incredibly sustainable, and to run and operate on 100% renewable energy and have zero waste and to use 90% less water. And there's lots of technology to have fully autonomous cars, which would make it safer, less noisy, thinner roads. There's lots of things that can be done. But
And
that's
I do know you're a believer in putting the cart before the horse sometimes, where you float ideas out into the world to see what sticks before you start taking those tangible steps.
Yeah.
How long had you been noodling on the city of Telosa, and how many people had you talked to before you started thinking about raising capital and thinking about hiring people? What was that initial ideation
I think
process?
probably years in the making to shape and form exactly this, the mission, the vision, the values. Like we have 3 values for the city of Telosa. It's open, fair, and inclusive. And the idea is to live those values in a way that no other city in the world does. But it's important to know up front, I think I've talked to a lot of people that are building cities, just came back from Dubai and Saudi Arabia to see they're building a lot of cities there. I haven't seen yet anyone build a city starting from putting people at the center and putting culture and values and a mission at the core. And because we've done that, we've got over 10,000 people have reached out and said they want to move there. You know, we haven't asked for that. That's just inbound, because people want to be part of something bigger. They don't want to just move to another city that has, you know, all the same things as any other city. There's a higher purpose here. So I think it's really important. Sometimes it does take years to figure out what that purpose is, what the mission, the vision. Some people rush it, and it's just like an exercise, as opposed to like having it be the true foundation of whatever company, team, city, whatever you want to build. You need to put in, I would say, like we've done this with the Timberwolves. We've applied the VCP framework and vision and strategy and mission and values, and we've logged already over 350 hours just discussing that and getting it down on paper. And I think if you talk to the executives there, the CEO and COO, Ethan and Ryan, they would tell you that it's sort of a transformational experience when you feel like you've really nailed it and worked through every word, and you communicate it to everyone in the company, and everybody knows exactly where you're heading, how you're going to get there, vision and strategy, and then what we stand for as an organization, what types of people are we looking for, what are our values, how do we live them like no other company in the world, or no other team or organization or whatever it is. It feels really good to get that right.
What would you say are the biggest learnings so far in applying this VCP framework to owning the Timberwolves and the Lynx? Because I don't think anyone's really approached sports team ownership in the way that you have. So what have been some of your biggest learnings and takeaways so far?
Well, I mean, we're still along the journey. So we're just about to roll out the entire VCP framework with the VC and P and all the elements. It's about 12 different elements covered. I think that the biggest learning is this is probably the most amount of time that collectively put into the VCP framework to date. And
even more so than Telosa and your other endeavors? Wow.
Yeah.
Is it because it's not a traditional business necessarily?
I think because it's not a traditional business, and I think because every time you do it, you realize, I wish I would have put a little more time into it, because it's really that valuable. And we did this time, and I think it's going to really pay incredible dividends, like just within the organization, to be able to recruit and retain talent, and also even players as well, both the Lynx, the Timberwolves, like, you know, wanting to come to an organization that really stands for something bigger than just winning, although winning is obviously a core component of it.
Sticking with the NBA, you did mention that you had hired a top player development coach to help you learn how to play basketball, to shoot. Any applications to how you run your businesses or the business world that you learned from those lessons? Because I feel like normally you're the one doing the teaching.
Yeah.
You're normally the expert, but this time there's someone else trying to show you the moves.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I have this sort of philosophy, like in anything, to always try and find the best. And I think the difference between someone who's the best and somebody who is like top 20% is orders of magnitude. Like the curve is, the compensation curve, sort of goes like this, but in reality, the ability of somebody goes like this, more exponential. And so you find the biggest opportunity with like the very, very best people. You could never overpay the very best people. And so I've found a lot of times companies, they'll just find somebody great and they'll just talk themselves out of it. Like, oh, they want this much money. Like, we can't afford that, or that seems crazy. Well, it could be crazy if they're really not the best, but if they are the best, it's not crazy. In fact, they're probably underpaid. And every single person that I could think of in my career that I've hired that's been the best, I mean, they would have been worth a lot more. Mm-hmm. And any person that is sort of like, you're just very, I would say average or ordinary, they're replaceable and probably overpaid. Like that's sort of, so even anything I do, I'll always start with the best because I think that's where the best value is. So when people always tell me like, what's your budget or what do you want to spend? It's not about budget, it's about where can you get the most bang for your buck. Because like you have a limited amount of dollars to play with in a startup and you can spend, and you want to spend it where you can get the most, what I call wins above replacement, WAR. It's a baseball kind of term that assesses how many more wins a player would add than their replacement. And that's such a great model to think about. Like, is this person, how many more wins or how much more can they add to the company over and above another person that you could find out there that has a similar skill set that's going to be paid a similar amount? And that is really where the value is created, and those are the types of people you need to like try and identify.
Let's take some audience questions. We have a few coming in that I like. So the first one is, we've discussed what differentiates different founders, but could you share the most standout ways that founders approached you? I'm sure you get lots of incomings.
Yeah, I get lots of incoming. I'll tell you what not to do, because I don't understand why people do this, is they write long emails. There's just no way. I get through like the first 3 or 4 sentences and that's it. Like at most, and maybe less. The other thing this is less about people looking for jobs, but people that like will bold certain like words to the thing that are like, I don't know, just like adjective keywords and things like that. It seems very salesy. Don't ever send an email like
Noted.
with bolded
I
words.
put bolds in my emails to you, so I will not do that anymore.
No, but that as an update, actually, I'm talking about cold.
Gotcha. Okay.
As an update, bold's great because it allows me to scan it and pick out the most important things. That's great.
Good.
But as an intro email, no.
Yeah.
The best way, in the Archer guys, when I met them, they came and sat on my couch and I did their seed round. He basically sent an email, and it was just very casual, and he said, hey, it was very short, I'm trying to remember, it was something along the lines of, I'm a local entrepreneur in New York, big fan of what you're doing, love to grab a coffee if you ever have 5 minutes, no pressure. Like something like that. It was really short, and it just seemed like very normal. It wasn't salesy. It was just sort of like he just threw it out there. And I don't think I did right away, but ultimately I did. And I'm not saying that would work necessarily. I don't want to get into emails, please.
Mark, you told me that I should send you a very short email. Here I am.
But I'm just giving an example, though, of how sometimes people want to give like all their background or try and pump themselves up, so I'm more likely to want to do it. It's sort of it's just more the casual. I'm in New York City. Like, I think he said there's a coffee shop a few blocks away. He's like, you ever want to get a coffee at so-and-so? It was like a few blocks from my house. Like, I'd love to just, pick your brain for 5 minutes and buy your coffee. It was like it wasn't overly salesy. It was very down to earth, and it was very convenient because it was a few blocks away, and it was just made it very easy.
Make it as easy for you as possible
Yeah.
to say yes and also follow through.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. In your opinion, Mark, what are the top 3 ethical challenges of the future? You don't have to have 3, just any number of ethical challenges.
I mean, after seeing the robot in the city of Neom in Saudi Arabia, it's a $400 million project. It's basically a very lifelike looking robot. Looks incredibly humanistic and can talk and use general AI. It's $400 million, so it's using incredible compute power. but it's general AI and can talk, the lips move, everything moves. I mean, it is scary how lifelike it was. And I've been told that people don't want to see her. Her name's Nora.
Really?
Her name's Nora.
Oh my.
Does not want to see, people won't let Nora get dressed in front of anyone. So they have to be like behind closed doors. Somebody kissed Nora on the cheek. People went crazy. They wanted to like, put the guy in jail for I mean, literally, like, these are real life things, and they're literally having discussions about what her rights are. Somebody, like, pushed her over, and they wanted the person to get in trouble. And it's like, well, is it a piece of property? It's like, no, it's not a property, it's a person. It's like, well, it's not a person, but it seems like a person, talks and communicates like a person, so what is it? And so I just find that fascinating in terms of ethics. Like, it'll be a long time before that 400 million would cost enough for that to be prevalent, but it will be some point in our future, and it's pretty scary because if somebody looks like a human and they talk just like a human, I mean, what makes
a human?
Yeah, what makes a human, and it just starts, you go down a rabbit hole. That's one. The other thing I find fascinating is autonomous vehicles, like how you have to actually program who to kill in a unique situation.
The trolley problem.
What's that?
The trolley problem, where if you decide there's 5 people you could save by averting a train,
Yeah.
but you're actually sending the train in that direction to kill that person. It's an ethics problem.
Yeah. I mean, and they have to actually program it. So okay, you're driving the car, people cross the road, and there's a, pregnant mom with a 4-year-old, and then there's like, 6 50-year-olds. Like, what do you do? Like that kind of thing, or it's a pregnant mom and a 10-year-old, and you literally have to program this. I find that ethically, that seems crazy to me, that you have to actually program that.
Yeah.
Somebody has to make a decision about how the car would make those decisions.
It's the stuff of science fiction, and we've seen movies and TV shows about this for all of time.
No, it's happening now. It's
Exactly.
actually happening. Yeah.
Our science fiction future is now. Okay, one more question, I think, from the audience. What are good reasons to raise money and bad reasons for raising money for your company? It's an interesting question.
I mean, I'm always a fan of raising as much money as you could possibly raise. Often I find entrepreneurs don't realize, like, there's good fundraising environments and bad. And anytime you talk to founders in good fundraising environments, they're like, I'm not going to take the money, I can take more, or whatever. They don't realize it can change like that, like it is right now. It is risk off today. Very hard to raise money. And so you always take as much money as you can get at the time. But I would say a good reason to raise money is that you've got a big vision and you need capital to get there. And either you've got a good CAC, cost to acquire a customer, to lifetime value of a customer. That relationship's really good and you want to put more fuel in the fire and spend more money marketing. Or you want to invest in a bigger sales team because the ROI and the salesperson has got a positive ROI. Like, you want to raise money when you can put the capital to work in a way that you already know is productive. A bad reason to raise money, I mean, hopefully nobody would do this, but I mean, if you're upside down in your unit economics and you don't have a viable business model and you raise money and throw good money after bad, I don't see that happen that often, but I mean, that would be a bad reason to do it.
Relatedly, through your VC fund, VCP Ventures, you do plan on writing bigger checks for bigger stakes. Very quickly, why is that the approach for VCP Ventures? Yeah,
VCP Ventures is a venture fund that I started with Alex Rodriguez. And the whole concept is go big early. So I do believe as a founder, the VCP framework is, to have a big vision and to hire the very best people, you need capital. And I always found that as an entrepreneur, there was this chicken and egg thing where it's like, well, how do I raise the capital if I find a hard time raising the capital because I don't have the very best people, and I didn't have this like really big vision because I don't know if I can raise the capital. And then the venture capital firm doesn't want to give you the capital because you don't have the best people yet. It's a very tricky situation. We wanted to kind of take off that stress off the table, find a great entrepreneur that has a big vision, and just with seed, with nothing else but a pitch deck and a person, here's $10 million. Go out and hire the very best people in the world, because if you do, you're going to have a much higher probability of achieving the vision than if you have to like hire people that aren't quite as good and try and skate by. So you raise 10 million, hire the very best people, build the very best product, and if the market's big and you have a big vision and a great founder, from that platform of 10 million, you'd be in a good position to go out and raise 50 million. And then you're kind of on your way to creating a really big company. So it's sort of, we can help create the winners by giving them 10 million. That's the idea, yeah.
I think we will leave things there. For anyone who wants to get involved in the city of Telosa, just be a part of the community, ask questions, you can email southbysouthwest@cityoftelosa.com. That's SXSW@cityoftelosa.com. There will be a human reading those emails.
Also on LinkedIn, I post a lot of stuff about it.
Follow Marc on LinkedIn, follow him on Twitter, follow him on Instagram. A lot of information to glean from you. So thank you so much, Marc. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Nora.
it. And
It's
thank you
great
to
to
all
be
of
here.
you.